Our next speaker is Dr. Alka Pande. She's an art historian, ex-reader of Indian arts and aesthetics at Punjab University. She's a curator, arts manager, prolific and extensive writer, and winner of many prestigious and highly coveted awards in India and abroad. Currently, she serves as consultant art advisor and curator of the Visual Arts Gallery at the India Habitat Center in New Delhi. Beja is a Portuguese writer, reporter, and arts curator. He's currently working on his second film as a result of his master degree in visual anthropology, an archive film using footage of movies made by Portuguese filmmakers in Macau and other Asian territories since the 1930s. He co-wrote a feature film and TV series titled Projecto Global, scheduled to be released internationally next year. And world-renowned cellist, composer, art educator, and writer Saskia Rao-de Haas is a pioneer in the world of music. She's written 8 books for children about music and is passionate about bringing classical music to children. She loves telling the stories of her books in Sangeet or Katha while playing her unique cello. Please put your hands together and welcome all of our amazing speakers for our next session, The Sum of All Arts. Thank you.
Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to our panelists and to all of you all at the audience. It's so nice to be doing this live. This session, Sum of All Arts, and its parts, in myriad ways reflects society and culture. In its duality, plurality, diversity, syncretism, aesthetics, raw beauty, edgy beauty, strife, and much beyond. Our panelists today have been lifetime practitioners and chroniclers of the art. So a round of applause to them and more power to their work in the arts. So just to set the context, the way the session would unfold, we'd sort of have some pegs for movement. I'll ask the panelists to speak a little bit about their work in the introductory segment. We then transition to something called the deep dive, where they'll pick a part of their work and they'd want to talk in detail. And then no journey is full of laughter and there are no tears. We look at the trials and tribulations and then open it to Q&A. So if I could begin with our guests from Portugal. Elder, you've been the co-founder and the program director of a festival, the literary festival in Macau, called the Script Road. You're a filmmaker, screenwriter, an editor-in-chief of the literary magazine. How has this road been that you've traveled on?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Can you hear? It's good? Okay. My name is Beja. I'm Portuguese. I'm very honored to be here. I am the only person in this panel who's not from India or based in India. So excuse me if my knowledge on the country is not very deep. And I'm also the only person who doesn't have a proper Wikipedia page. So you see, I'm losing here.
You're being humble.
Well, what can I say? Once I was a younger man, and when I was 25 years old, after studying journalism and writing on the arts from the very beginning, even in the college years, I decided to move to China. It was a very unpredictable decision, just based on a relationship I had at the time. And I went to work in Macau, this former Portuguese colony, where Portuguese language newspapers still exist. After a couple of years living there, me and another friend, who was also the owner of this newspaper I was working for, decided to come up with this idea, crazy idea at the time, and create a literature festival in 3 languages, Chinese, Portuguese, and English, that would try to put together writers and other arts practitioners from different geographies, the Portuguese-speaking world, the Chinese-speaking world, and elsewhere. It started as a very amateur event, a small event inside a Polytechnic Institute, and it was amateur in the sense that it was something we were doing with a lot of love, but also amateur because we didn't know how to put it together. So we made a lot of serious mistakes in that first edition. Of course, we learned on the job, and eventually in 2016, 17, 18, the festival has grown to become the biggest festival in China in terms of number of guests, in terms of number of sessions, the work we did with the schools. So it became bigger than the Hong Kong one, the Shanghai one. It was really beautiful to see it flourishing, and especially by working with the local communities. We were a set of three directors. Two of us were Portuguese, one was Chinese, but from the first moment, as for me, I speak for myself, I wanted that to be a festival for the city, not for a community within the city. And the city is, of course, 95% Chinese. And so the first language in which we would do everything was Chinese. So imagine the same set that you have here, but with cabins full of translators to translate everything to 2 other languages. So if you speak Portuguese, that's Chinese and English, and so on and so on. For a long time, that was most of my life. The festival kind of took over my almost whole existence. But of course, I kept finding here and there time to do something else. And that something else was, of course, my writing, still on the arts, a little bit of non-fiction essay writing, some short stories, and eventually I moved to start working with film in 2 ways. Writing for the screen first, but that was a job I was and I'm still doing for Portuguese or with Portuguese filmmakers, which is a curious thing because after living 10 years abroad, or more than 10 years, now I also feel like a foreigner in my own country. So when I'm writing an historical, I was writing an historical drama set in the 80s, right after the Portuguese Revolution. And it was very curious to dig into the history of my country, of my people, and understanding that I was so far away from it for the past 10 years, or at least far away from most of it. And the other way is as a filmmaker as well. I have been doing short films, and I'm finalizing this master degree. I went back to university in visual anthropology, so I am also working, as a visual artist for the past couple of years, and I think for now that's pretty much enough.
Great. Kudos to you. If your festival was the biggest festival in China, kudos. Cheers to that. Alka, if I could bring you in here. Your role, you wear many hats: a historian, an Indian academician, a researcher, a museum curator, writer, editor, spent 3 decades in this field. Your work on gender and sexuality, if I may, from your enormous body of work, if I could pick these 2, has been really path-breaking. You've been an outlier in some sense. Would you like to just take us through how that canvas spanned?
Thank you for the question, Sadhana. All what I want to say right now is that everything in my life has happened through a series of accidents and incidents. I come from a generation where whatever was dealt out to us, we just had to accept it. And being good Indians, we had strong parents at that time, strong mother, so we weren't allowed to complain. And, I grew up in Delhi. My dad was in the government. So my initial education was in Delhi. Then I went off for 3 years to Kanpur and then came back to Delhi, where I finished my undergraduate studies. And that time, my role in life was completely different. I was into sports. I took a wrong subject in college. I took economics honors. And then my dad moved to Mumbai. And there, it was a different life. I got into what you call broadcasting, cinema, and the media. And I started reading news on Doordarshan, doing voicing for ads, and it was very much into the media. But why I'm giving a little background to this is because all my life's experiences then fed into the work which I now am totally devoted to. My mother was a trained musician of the Gwalior Gharana, so like in those days, we were all forced to learn music. We had a music tutor coming home, a dance tutor coming home. I learned Bharatanatyam. I did the Praveen in music from Prayag. So we had the usual North Indian genteel home traditions. It was against sheer fate that got me to Chandigarh about almost 38 years ago, when I get married to a civil servant, and then my life changes. From media, I go to a very structured town where I think the average age of people was 80 years. Grey city, grey buildings, modernity of India, Corbusier's town. I was kind of just got into an MA in art history, did my second MA, started teaching, and then just trying to make the most of staying in this one-horse cantonment town, I enrolled for a PhD, and my PhD was on a Leela Murti of Shiva called Ardha Nari Ishwara, the Lord who is half woman. And from there, a different journey started completely. I got a Charles Wallace Award in 1999, and I went to Goldsmiths College for a year, and a certain shift happened into my work, because from an art historical PhD, I turned it into a cultural metaphor. I did a book called Ardhanarishwar, the Androgyne, Probing the Gender Within. My journey of gender and sexuality started then. And the book became the book because it deals with transgender, transsexuals, the LGBTQ testimonies. It was interesting work. And then I get an offer from Rao-de to do a book on Indian erotica. Now that was taboo. I did it in 2001, and ever since I've done a number of interpretations of the Kama Sutra. In 2016, I did a big Kama Sutra exhibition in the City of Love, Paris, for 3 months at the Pinakothek. And then that led into HarperCollins, Ananta Padmanabham, asking me to do a book called Fabulous, which was really on the journey of the lingam, beginning with Shiva's symbolic form of worship. So it's been a long journey, a challenging journey in many ways. Sounds more interesting from the outside, but when you are doing the research and also being a woman looking at the Kama texts, because my latest books were a set of 4 Kama texts which came out from the Kama Sutra. So it's been challenging, but it's always been thrilling.
Hold the thought, we'll revisit this work, because it's a very important part of, your devotion to an area which was very tough. It's a road less traveled, so hold the thought, we're going to come back to that. Saskia I must share, is the creator of the Indian cello, a 15-string instrument. She brought in the cello to Indian classical music. Apart from just being an Indian cello player, she's an educator, she's a composer. She has, while learned the Western classical idiom, has embraced the Indian classical traditions, creating the most mellifluous of sounds.
Well, thank you for...
It's true, I'm not exaggerating. I'm sure Alka would agree.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
thank you.
Just share with us, Saskia, how did the musical note start?
It's a very good question. Thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you for being a part of this wonderful festival with such eloquent other speakers. Mostly my eloquence would indeed be through my music. So today I'll have to talk, which is wonderful as well. I was thinking when you were speaking, Alka, I think the theme that connects us is serendipity. We come to certain places completely by accident. And that is perhaps how from the Netherlands, the beautiful countryside, a windmill, a few cows thrown in, some tulips, now lives in a city of 24 million people in New Delhi. How did that happen? I sometimes ask that question myself. Some of the answer is maybe music is a profession that you don't really choose. It chooses you. It comes on your way, and you kind of just choose to follow, like the Hansel and Gretel story, the little crumbs of bread that you just follow somewhere to your destiny, if we want to use big words. I think that was my journey. So I started off as a cellist when I was 5. No, 7. I'm exaggerating already. Please. So when I was 7, from a family of musicians, music lovers, and it was very clear very soon I would be a cellist. Indian music came on my way when I was studying at the Conservatory of Rotterdam and doing a double major in musicology because I love writing as well and doing research. And so that combination became very interesting to me. I once listened to Indian classical music, the music of the guru of my husband, Pandit Ravi Shankar, and first fell in love with the music, came to India to study. Later with the musician, we got married and I moved to New Delhi to live the life of an artist. It's one thing to live it on the boundary, but I dove right in and learning every day since then. Performing, very lucky to have gotten a lot of opportunities to perform all over the world. And in the last 10 years, a role as an educator. But I think we'll talk more about that. Should I hold that thought?
Hold the thought.
Yes, I'll hold that thought.
We'll come back to
Yes.
that. So great. You all have etched the sum of all your arts. The sum of all your arts. You know, the aggregate and the whole gets perfect when it is the smaller notes that all come together. So Alka, if I could turn back to you and for you to elaborate on the work that was the closest to your heart that you were speaking on about.
So the work again, which has become closest to my heart, was again by accident. When I was asked to do this book on Indian erotica and then asked to write the Kama Sutra and then do Kama texts, first and foremost, getting information in people haven't really worked in this particular aspect of Indian art and aesthetics, which deals a lot with early Sanskrit poetry. So there were, I know Sanskrit, but I'm not that good that I can read all the original texts. I'm still learning. Having said that, to get the right kind of Ragamalika together, the group of authors and things, was a near impossible task. And with that, being a woman, writing on, when you talk of the Kama Sutra, people think it's sex. People think it's a man standing on his head doing a Shirshasana, having sex with 6 women at the same time. But the more I read about the whole aspect, not just the Kama Sutra, whether it was the Anangaranga or it was the Rati Krida, the concept of Kama, the concept of Ananga, and different concepts of the erotic, I understood that there was a great, great aesthetics of the erotic. And it is, in some sense, the essence of our rasa theory as well. But whenever I'd go to a library or after my first Kama Sutra was published, I had a lot of men cozying up to me, and I was, of course, much younger. This is 20 years ago. Now I'm an old woman and beyond gender. I would have a lot of men cozying up to me and saying, so, tell us about the positions. Oh, so tell us about how do you, you know. So it was tough, even going to libraries. In fact, once I was sitting with a lot of Kama Sutras on my table, and I just looked up and I saw a man making eyes at me, and I was wondering why. Till I realized that I had this illustrated Kama Sutra on my desk. I had all these. But this is the lighter side of life. Even to have the courage to interpret them from the point of view of a woman with a lived experience in post-independent India, and rereading the text wasn't easy for me. I have to give a lot of credit to my publishers, whether it is HarperCollins, whether it's Speaking Tiger, whether it is Rupa. They published my work as it was. But what
No edits.
Huh?
No edits. Or very little edits.
No, they did edits, but that was language and, you know, just cross-referencing.
Not really the content.
No content. And I would love to, and I want to acknowledge their
Contribution.
their contribution, their their strength in allowing me the creativity of expression. When I did The Fabulous, and it was covered by digital media in Paris, there were certain attacks on it, and they had to bring down the coverage. This is not even 2 years ago, but this is only in recent times. What the beauty of the study of Indian erotica is that it's opened a new canvas, and it's shown me how beautiful Indian arts and aesthetics is, how much we are driven with vilas, with pleasure, how much of the fact there is of inclusion, that when you read the Kama Sutra, it's not one book, it's a set of 7 books, and each book has wonderful wisdom, but it is all about how do you enjoy a life well lived. So there is kind of a bipolarity in the literature, in the art we make, and in the life we lead. So it's at that point that there are many challenges.
So that intersection you have very nicely put across in your work. I think the literary spaces and the we are lucky
history
to have had your work. If I could just transition back to you, Elder. From your sum of the whole of the Macau Festival, you moved to the space of being a filmmaker, where you spend most of your time.
Yes.
And a screenwriter.
A writer for the screen and a filmmaker,
So
yes.
that's an area where you're spending
Most of the time
considerable
for the
amount
past
of your
years, yeah.
time.
So I would say that there are 2 main things that really interest me at this precise moment. As a writer, of course, because by accident I ended up in China, I've been for the past many years writing about China, and I believe I'm one of the few people trying to have, play that small role of trying to explain or present, introduce Chinese contemporary writers, other artists, some very interesting key characters from Chinese history that are completely unknown in my country, in my language, to that audience, to those people who speak and read in Portuguese. As a writer, that has been a focus of interest, and I'm working on a collection of essays related to that. As a filmmaker and a screenwriter, I'm very interested in the power of images as the visual power and the way in which governments back and now use image to crystallize power. So the main project I'm working on, it's an archive film that's going to analyze and dig deep into all the footage collected by Portuguese filmmakers since the 30s until nowadays in Macau. And to understand, especially, of course, during those decades of dictatorship back in Portugal, where these filmmakers would be sent to these territories in Asia to collect images and then go back and put together this beautiful idea of what they called the so-called Portuguese Asia. And how did they use this very new tool that cinema was at the time, and still is actually, if we think about it, it has 100 few years, so it's still a very new tool. But it was definitely used and manipulated as a propaganda tool. And it's very interesting to go back to those archives and to find new things in those images, things that haven't been seen before, because now we are seeing them with different eyes, with a decolonization perspective that, fortunately, I'm very happy for that. It's completely taking over my country. For the past decade, I would say the discourse changed a lot. And this work has been done with regards to the former African colonies, but very little has been done with regards to the former Asian territories, especially, of course, Macau, East Timor, and Goa, where I'm going next, also to start exploring the archives over there. So I love the filmmaking, as a way of recollecting images, but honestly, I'm more interested. I think there's too much noise around us, and I think it's very interesting to, just to sit and look at everything that has been done before and try to work on top of what is there, the archives that are sleeping for so many years, and that there's so much potential, narrative, visual, political potential in those images. So that's what I'm trying to do, and hopefully something will come out next year.
It's nice that you found kind of a golden mean in your artistic journey. And Saskia, I'd like you to speak a little bit about your work, your educational book, Shastra, which was, I think, launched in New York in the Asia Society. Saskia was here with us at the Bangalore Literature Festival, at the Children's Festival, and I think Bangalore's children community had a lot of musicians thanks to her work. So do speak a little bit about your work as an educator, particularly about the book.
Thank you for that. Yes, exactly. Different roles indeed, as a composer, trying to create more dialogues between different art forms, whether it's visual arts and music. We just did a project at the National Gallery of Modern Arts, interpreting Dutch and Indian artworks in a musical way. Or indeed writing children books, or playing classical Indian jugalbandi. To me, there is no distinction between any of that. I'm not playing roles. It's to me a seamless part of who I am as an artist, and what and together, often also with Shubhendra, what we want to express. Now, this education project started in 2014 when I was asked to set up a music program for probably the most underprivileged or underserved communities in Delhi, the Nizamuddin Basti. And I went there and set up a music program where I tried to empower the older girls who had a wealth of musical knowledge. Their fathers, their brothers were all performing at the Dargah. They had the knowledge, they were these song bearers. So to help them teach music to their younger peers in that school, and at the same time help them to retain these girls especially, that they would finish their school and would have a role as a music teacher, as a music educator. It started with that. Then it became a bit more than that, because we saw that not only in the underserved communities, music education was not working very well, or not at all, but also perhaps in the overserved and overprivileged communities, a good outline, resources, methodology, pedagogy, all the not so sexy and immediately interesting parts of music education, that is what we put our hands in. And now we're serving over 60,000 children. Thank you. My latest book is Shastra, which is, excuse my Dutch pronunciation, but that is a concise history of Indian music. I never found that. And I always, you know, people would ask, where can I find an introduction on Indian music? So this is from the prehistory to contemporary today in 100 pages. A little bit ambitious, but with the amazing artworks of Colin Campbell, because music and every form of art, they go together. Absolutely. To tell a story, we need visuals, we need audio, we need words. Everything needs to come together. So that book, Shastra, I'm very, very happy with. And yeah, have a look. I'll be there after this session.
Yeah. So we have about 8 minutes. We should keep Q&A to the audience. Any one of you. The session has really been about serendipity. It's been about a grand design, a lot of interconnectedness in all your works. Any one of you would like to take on the fact that Alka's spoken about the trials, the taboo, the subject? I
would love to talk about a little, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Sure.
No, because the Hindu newspaper at some point named me Indian by art. To me, Indian arts and Indian philosophy has become a part of global heritage. There's so much to learn from here. Now, of course, challenges as someone who plays the cello, a female instrumentalist in a kind of dominated, male-dominated world. It gives challenges, but it also gives a lot of opportunities for dialogue and communication. My worst nightmare, I'll share that right here with you, was my debut concert at the very traditional 130-year-old Dover Lane Music Conference in Kolkata, which is literally baptizing by fire. You can literally describe it like that. Now, for some reason I don't understand very well, they had given me a microphone which I think was from All India Radio in the 1940s. Not great. So the whole audience started calling chalo. So which either means, okay, get lost, or they actually meant the cello. Thank God they meant the second part. But these few minutes on the stage, I think were the one most difficult of my professional career as a starter. Then, of course, all went well after that, but yeah.
That's the beauty of the arts, no? The triumph of the unexpected. So we're 6 minutes, and I'll open the for Q&A. Do we have?
Hi. I loved what you do. I mean, I didn't know someone had gone so deep into Kama Sutra and studied. I write about women, and I've just completed writing a book, and today I'm looking for a publisher. So, what do you think should an author do? Like, what should be the objective of an author?
Of a novel?
I write non-fiction, so it's about sending out a message.
Yeah, what I would just say is that just read, because more about, if you're writing about the Indian woman and you're wanting to know and understand the different nuances of that, if you don't know Sanskrit, read translations, and there are good translations available, a lot of Sanskrit poetry, because that is so rich with the thoughts and the, for example, Keshava Das's Rasika Priya, that has the Ashtanayikas in it. There are different aspects of rasa in the Natya Shastra. There is the whole thing of the Naika there, the different kind of heroines, the Padmini, the Shankhini. So you'll just understand this from different aspects of the feminine discourse in India, which is different to a huge amount of religious aspects of the Devi, the eternal goddess. And in Tantra, she has been described in many ways, from the vagina, from the yoni, to her luscious breasts by Adi Shankaracharya and the Saundarya Lahiri. So, there are different texts of Sanskrit which will give you a very interesting understanding in the way women were represented in pre-modern society, and that gives you a completely different aspect to what is happening in the contemporary world today, where it is immediately about the body. But when you look at Indian art and aesthetics, it is about Sharira, and Sharira encompasses the emotional body, the physical body, the philosophical body. You look at the works of Chandralekha and how she has interpreted old texts into contemporary. The idea is to look at our pre-modern texts with your contemporary lens, and you will find your own path. That's how I looked at it. I hope I could have answered.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's an interesting session. My question is again to Alka ma'am. You have clearly, through your research, discovered in detail what was not a taboo. Once upon a time, we celebrated our body, anatomy, all the aspects that you just mentioned in our religious texts, the way of life, and things like that. So my question is, what was once not a taboo became a taboo, And now, the younger generation especially, don't care about morals, they don't care about, in the sense that they are clear about how they want to express. So what is this permission we are waiting for, or how would you say society in general or people of our country, what is this permission we are waiting for to celebrate what was not once a taboo?
That's a very bold question, and for a woman of where I come from, I'm a bit nervous of answering it, but what the hell, let me just go for it. Let me take on the young as, and I really admire the young women of my country today. They are going through a very difficult time, women of your generation. But what I want to say is that, I don't want to keep going back to the past and, hallowing the past for what it was, because there's always a cultural context. What was relevant at that point was for that period and what the construct around that was. I also don't want to only blame the Mughals. I don't blame them at all for taboo, because they were the biggest pleasure seekers. The maximum number of illustrated erotic texts which were done in the medieval period. It was a different part, and the tradition of bhakti was also at that point. The British, yes, because of their own innate sense of they are very, in many ways, repressed emotionally. If you read The History of Sexuality by Michel Foucault, you will see that they covered the piano legs, they covered their sandwiches. So it was a different kind of, expression of their sexuality. But if you look at their erotic art which was being done by the British, which is there in my, I've given references to that in my catalogue of what I did of the erotic and the spiritual in Paris. And you see a whole amount of art which was actually subversion in a way. But if you look at today, I think it's got nothing to do with permissions. It's just a cultural thing. And I do feel a bit worried about the young today, because it's become so much about the self, the individual self. If my mother would tell me, why are you eating this, you'll become fat, I never looked at her and said, don't body shame me. I just got scared and I said, okay, no more samosas like that. But I think it's a catch-22 situation today. When you are looking at permissions, the young today don't need permissions. They are very empowered. You can start anything. It's like a startup today. But having said that, I think we need to also understand where we come from, and we need to respect experience and age. So permissions you take from yourself, but I think it's important to also, first and foremost, it's important to love yourself and understand yourself. So that's what I would say.
That's a beautiful
I don't think
sentiment.
you need permissions.
I'm so sorry, we are completely out of time. I apologize and would love you to interact with them. Their speakers are going to be here. Thank you so much to Elda, Alka, Saskia, for this riveting dialogue and discourse. Thank you, pleasure.
Once again, big round of applause.
I would just like to thank our moderator and the way she's handled it, because we are three very different people and she's brought it together beautifully. Thank you, Sadhana.